Hey everyone, 99% of you watching aren't subscribed. Let's change that. Hit that subscribe button, and at 1,000 subscribers, we'll drop special stories just for you.
The galaxy first learned to fear human engineers on a quiet Tuesday. The United Systems Concord had been arguing for 3 days straight. In the crystalline debate chambers orbiting the gas giant Ithries, delegates shimmered, pulsed, and vibrated in rising waves of alarm. At the center of the chamber hung a projection of the Virex pulsar, once a dependable navigational beacon, at the edge of the Virex expanse, now a ticking stellar weapon. Its magnetic field lines writhed like luminous serpents. Radiation flares lashed out in chaotic intervals. The models were unanimous. Collapse was imminent. And when it went, 12 inhabited systems would die in a wash of relativistic plasma. The Illyri had been the first to speak. Faceted and radiant, they processed gravitational mathematics the way other species breathed. The neutron degeneracy threshold has been breached, their prime analysts intoned. Core instability will cascade. The emission cones will widen by 0.004 radians, sufficient to encompass all proximal habitable zones. The Thawne chorus followed, their many bodies speaking in harmonic overlap. Evacuation probabilities, insufficient. Time to full collapse, 19 standard days. Survival rate across affected systems, 12.3%. The sortie, beings of resonant energy fields, dimmed in collective grief. It was by all measures an extinction-level event. And so, reluctantly, the Concord invoked Article 7, provisional assistance from associate species, which was how Chief Engineer Mara Kovac of a human exploratory vessel Indomitable found herself standing in a chamber built for beings who thought in higher dimensions. She was eating something from a foil packet. You are consuming nutrients during crisis. Observe an Illyri delegate. Low blood sugar makes me pessimistic. Mara replied, swallowing. You don't want that. Behind her stood a small team of human engineers. Javier Iqbal, propulsion specialist. Dr. Aisha Mbaye, theoretical physicist, Lin Wei, structural systems, and 2 graduate interns who were trying very hard not to stare at the floating alien geometries. The projection of the pulsar rotated between them. Mara squinted at it. Okay, she said. Walk me through what you've tried. There was a pause. We have attempted magnetic stabilization, said the Illyri. Failed, said the Thawne. Quantum vacuum damping, offered the sortie. Failed, echoed the Thawne. Mass injection to rebalance the core? Insufficient, said the Illyri. Any added matter increases instability. Mara nodded slowly. Right, so you're all trying to stop it from collapsing. Yes, said the Thawne, puzzled. That is the objective. Mara uncapped a marker and walked up to the projection field. It shimmered uncertainly as she began sketching crude lines over the elegant alien simulations. What if that's the wrong objective? She asked. The chamber's ambient light dimmed. Clarify, said the Illyri. You're treating this like a failure condition, Mara said, like something to prevent. But the collapse isn't optional anymore. It's happening. So the real question isn't how do we stop it? It's how do we aim it? A ripple of confusion passed through the delegates. A stellar collapse is not projectile, said a Thawne voice. No, Mara agreed, but its emission cone is. She circled the projected radiation beams. Right now, when the pulsar destabilizes, the beam widens and sweeps across inhabited space. But what if we constrain it? Narrow the cone, force the release along a control vector. You propose to reshape a supernova-scale magnetic eruption, said the Illyri, facets flickering with disbelief. Mara grinned. Yeah. The Thawne chorus went silent for a full 3 seconds, an eternity for a species that communicated in microsecond harmonics. The energy involved exceeds the total output of your species' civilization by a factor of... Don't say it, Javier muttered. It's going to be a big number. 800 trillion, finished the Thawne. Okay, Mara said. So we don't overpower it. We redirect it. She began sketching again, this time not equations, but shapes, rings, lines, anchors, a gravitational lattice. Aisha said softly, catching on, not contain the pulsar, to buy a space-time around it. Exactly, Mara said. We don't fight the explosion. We give it a path of least resistance. The Sorethi's field flickered in alarm. The construction requirements would be astronomical. Linway finally spoke. Good thing we're near an asteroid belt. Within 12 hours, human construction ships were en route to the inner debris fields of the Virex system. The Concorde watched in escalating horror. Human vessels were not graceful like Illyri lightcraft or elegant like sortie wave ships. They were industrial, blocky, modular, bristling with attachment points and external scaffolding. They began by harvesting asteroids whole. Mass drivers slammed kilometer-wide rocks into position. Automated foundries chewed stone and spat out alloy frameworks. Swarms of drones stitched the pieces together into titanic ring segments that dwarfed cities. "What are they building?" whispered a Thaln observer. "A lever," Aisha replied over the open channel. "A very, very long lever." The plan was simple in principle and absurd in scale. Construct a chain of gravitational anchors, artificially dense mass concentrations, arrayed in a helical pattern around the pulsar's rotational axis. When the collapse began, the anchors would distort local space-time just enough to favor one emission direction over others, not stopping the blast. Steering it, the Illyri ran simulations non-stop. Projected success probability, 21%, one reported. "That's optimistic," another said. Mara overheard. "Hey," she called across the channel. "What were the survival odds without us?" 12.3%, the Thaln admitted. "Then we're already improving," she said. "See? Engineering." As the 19th day approached, the pulsar's magnetic storms intensified. Radiation alarms screamed across nearby systems. Evacuation fleets pushed engines to their limits. The human lattice was only 84% complete. Time to collapse revised. 9 hours, said the Illyri Prime Analyst. Mara stared at the half-finished structure. "Good news," Javier said. "We don't need 100%. "That is not good news," replied a sortie delegate. "It is if you're human," Javier said. They made a decision no Concorde species would have considered. They activated the lattice early. The partially completed anchors flared to life, their artificial gravity wells punching dimples into space-time. The structure groaned under tidal forces. 3 segments tore free and spiraled into the pulsar, vaporizing instantly. Structural integrity failing. Lynn reported. "Hold it together," Mara said, eyes locked on the feed. The pulsar collapsed. For a fraction of a second, the universe seemed to inhale. Then the star erupted. A beam of unimaginable fury lanced outward. Plasma and radiation accelerated to near light speed. It struck the nearest gravitational anchor, bent, and narrowed. The emission cone constricted like a focusing lens. Instead of blooming outward into inhabited space, the blast channeled along the helical bias of the lattice, carving a brilliant corridor through unoccupied interstellar void. Several anchors disintegrated. One imploded, but the path held. Across the Concorde sensor network, the impossible registered as fact. The Virex pulsar did not sterilize 12 systems. By the time the Celtominion arrived at the edge of the Tauros Gate, the galaxy already knew humans were dangerous. It just didn't yet understand why. Tauros Gate was not a natural wormhole. It was older than most civilizations still breathing, an artifact of unknown origin, stabilized by fields so precise that even the United Systems Concorde only partially understood them. It connected 6 major trade arteries and 3 densely populated clusters. Whoever controlled Tauros controlled a third of the galaxy's commerce. The Celtominion did not believe in shared commerce. They believed in acquisition. Their fleets were brutal in design. Sleek, armored crescents bristling with gravitational lances. They did not negotiate. They issued declarations of inevitability. When their forward armada translated out of hyperspace, Concorde sensors recorded 312 capital ships and thousands of support craft. The Concorde had 91 combat-effective vessels in the region. Evacuation of civilian stations began immediately. In the Tauros command hub, a rotating torus of steel and crystal, Admiral Serret watched tactical projections with thinning patience. The Illyri predictive engines overlaid probability branches across the display. Engagement outcome, unfavorable. In tone, the Illyri wore mind. Kelt targeting algorithms demonstrate adaptive anticipation, curves beyond Concord standard. They see our moves before we make them, Sarah muttered. The Thon chorus resonated from a harmonic transmitter. Their doctrine relies on deterministic modeling. They simulate opponent decision trees and preempt optimal maneuvers. They cheat, Sarah said flatly. They calculate, corrected the Illyri. It was at this moment that a cluster of bulky, inelegant ships dropped from translation behind Concord lines. Human ships, not warships in the traditional sense. They were industrial hulls, rectangular cargo frames reinforced with external trusses. Some still bore faded shipping logos. One had visible scorch marks around a hastily welded turret mount. Sarek closed all four of his eyelids in slow despair. A channel request flashed. Commander Javier Iqbal appeared on the holoscreen, grinning like someone about to test a theory on a cosmic scale. "Heard you got a modeling problem," he said. "We requested fleet reinforcements," Sarek replied. "You have brought freight haulers." "Retrofitted freight haulers," Javier corrected. Very important distinction. Behind him, engineers moved through the bridge in controlled chaos. Panels were open. Cables trailed across the floor. One crew member was striking a console with a wrench. Sarek stared. "Your vessels appear damaged." "They're fine," Javier said. "Mostly." The Kelt fleet began advancing in disciplined formation, their ships maintaining mathematically optimal spacing. Their first volley, long-range gravitational lances, tore through empty space precisely where Concord ships would have moved if they had executed standard evasive patterns. "They're predicting us again," said the Illyri war mind. "Good," Javier murmured. "Means they're watching." He turned to his crew. "All ships, initiate Phase 1. Desynchronize." Across the human flotilla, something extraordinary and deeply concerning happened. They stopped coordinating. Drive plumes flickered irregularly. Thrusters fired out of sequence. Power signatures fluctuated. One vessel spun 90 degrees off axis before correcting with a violent burst of lateral thrust. "Your formation is collapsing," Sarek said. "Not collapsing," Javier replied. "We're introducing noise." The Kelt algorithms reacted instantly. Targeting reticles adjusted. Probability trees recalculated and began to fracture. Human ships did not maneuver along optimal escape vectors. They jittered. They overcorrected. They executed thrust patterns seeded by quantum random number generators tied to cosmic background radiation. Their navigation AIs have been rewritten to incorporate weighted irrationality, occasionally selecting the second or third worst tactical option purely to destabilize predictive models. One human cruiser appeared to lose power entirely, drifting helplessly. Kelt targeting locked on. At the last possible microsecond, the dead ship vented superheated plasma sideways, flipping into a vector no simulation had forecast. The Kelt salvo passed harmlessly by. Inside the Tauros command hub, the Illyri war mind stuttered. Kelt targeting confidence has dropped from 97% to 61%. It reported. "That is statistically impossible," said a Thon voice. On the human command deck, Aisha Mbe watched data scroll across her screen. "They're trying to recenter on pattern recognition," she said. "They assume there's a pattern." "Is there?" asked the junior engineer. "Not anymore," Javier said. Phase 2 began. The cargo haulers opened their bays. Instead of missiles, they released construction pods. Dozens, then hundreds. The pods streaked toward Tauros Gate itself. Sarek's secondary eyelids snapped open. "Commander Iqbal, explain. We're upgrading your infrastructure," Javier said. "You cannot modify the gate mid-combat. Its stabilization fields are delicately." "Understood." Javier cut in. "We're not touching the core, just the periphery." The pods latched onto the outer ring structures of Tauros Gate and began assembling something that looked suspiciously like scaffolding. The Kelt noticed. They redirected fire toward the gate. Their lances curved inward and bent, not randomly, systematically. The human pods had deployed micro-singularity projectors, descendants of the technology tested at the Naraka Drift. Individually, each projector produced a negligible gravitational distortion. Together, arranged in a lattice around the gate, they formed a dynamic field, a gravitational lens. The next Kelt volley struck the edge of the lens and refracted, splitting into cascading arcs that sliced through empty space, and then, unpredictably, into the flanks of their own formation. 2 Kelt cruisers vanished in silent bursts of plasma. Inside the Tauros hub, silence fell. "You turned the gate into a mirror," Sarah breathed. "Not a mirror," Aisha corrected over channel. "A feedback amplifier." The Kelt fleet attempted to compensate. They recalculated firing angles, adjusted for gravitational distortion, but the distortion was no longer static. Human engineers were adjusting the micro-singularity outputs in real time, introducing subtle fluctuations, tiny, deliberate inconsistencies that compounded across light seconds of travel. Every Kelt shot became a gamble. Every calculation fed into uncertainty. Meanwhile, the human ships continued their erratic ballet, refusing to be predicted. Kelt commanders, bred on millennia of deterministic doctrine, faced an enemy that did not optimize for survival in conventional ways. Human vessels occasionally placed themselves in apparent danger, only to use that danger's leverage, slingshotting around distorted gravity wells or venting energy into the gate's lensing field. One human freighter rammed a Kelt destroyer, not as an act of desperation, as a maneuver. Its reinforced cargo spine crumpled the Kelt vessel's forward lance array while simultaneously anchoring a construction pod directly onto the destroyer's hull. Seconds later, the pod activated a localized gravity shear, twisting the Kelt ship's own mass against itself. The destroyer tore apart like overstressed metal. In the Tauros hub, the Illyri war mind recalculated again, Kelt fleet cohesion decreasing. Predictive accuracy at 38% and falling. The Thawne chorus shifted tone, from fear to something like awe. They are not fighting to win individual exchanges. They realized. They are attacking the enemy's assumptions. On the Kelt flagship, confusion metastasized. Their simulations no longer converged. Every attempt to stabilize predictive models resulted in divergent outcomes. Human behavior could not be reduced to optimal pathways. It was improvisational, recursive, occasionally self-sabotaging, and devastatingly effective. The final blow did not come from a superweapon. It came from doubt. As more Kelt shots bent back into their own ranks, and as their casualty projections spiked beyond acceptable thresholds, the Dominion commanders issued a withdrawal, not because they had been destroyed, but because they could no longer calculate victory. When the last Kelt vessel vanished into hyperspace, Tauros Gate remained intact, now bristling with half-temporary, half-permanent human modifications. The Concorde fleet drifted in stunned formation. Admiral Serret opened a channel to Javier. "You have preserved the gate," he said carefully. "For now," Javier replied. "You want to reinforce those lens nodes. I can send schematics. You altered one of the oldest artifacts in known space during active combat. Technically," Aisha interjected, "we improved it." Serret studied the human commander. "You understand," he said slowly, "that your tactics were irrational." Javier smiled. "Only if you assumed the goal was to win the battle," he said. "It wasn't." Serret's crest twitched. "Then what was it?" "To make sure they never feel comfortable fighting us again." Weeks later, Concorde intelligence intercepted fragments of Kelt internal transmissions. The Dominion had updated its threat assessment. Humans were no longer categorized as emergent industrial species. They were reclassified as strategic destabilizers. Across the galaxy, a new understanding began to spread. Other civilizations mastered physics. Humans weaponized uncertainty. And somewhere in a human shipyard near Earth, engineers were already discussing improvements to Tauros Gate, debating how much gravitational distortion was too much before space-time itself filed a complaint. Officially, Horizon's Edge was a research station. Unofficially, it was a dare, suspended in precarious orbit around a fast-spinning black hole in the Naraka Drift. The station existed to observe, measure, and, under no circumstances, interfere. The drift was a graveyard of collapsed stars, a region where gravity folded space into knots and light itself curved back in second thoughts. The Concorde had built Horizon's Edge at a respectful distance from the largest singularity in the cluster, designated NRK 7. It was a curved black hole, spinning near its theoretical maximum, dragging space-time around it in a violent whirl known as frame dragging. The Illyri considered NRK 7 a natural wonder. The Thon considered it a boundary condition. The Sortie considered it a place not to poke. Human engineers considered it underutilized. Dr. Aisha Mbaye floated in the station's external construction cradle, staring down at the black hole's accretion disk. It glowed like a cosmic hurricane, bands of white-blue plasma spiraling inward, heating to millions of degrees before vanishing past the event horizon. Her visor display overlaid equations across the void. "You're smiling again," said Linway over the comm. "I'm thinking," Aisha replied. "That's what worries me." Behind her, anchored to the station's outer ring, was the beginning of something that had not been in the original research proposal. A circular array of superconducting coils, each the size of a small city, linked by trusses of adaptive alloy. The project name in the human files was modest, Penrose Prototype. The Illyri liaison had read the proposal 3 times and still sounded uncertain. "You intend," the crystalline being said carefully during the last council meeting, "to extract rotational energy from NRK 7. "Yes," Aisha replied. "That energy is a property of space-time geometry." "Yes, it is not fuel." Aisha tilted her head. "Everything's fuel if you're brave enough." The chamber had dimmed in collective unease. The theoretical basis was sound, at least on paper. The Penrose process, a concept centuries old in human physics, suggested that energy could be extracted from a rotating black hole by exploiting frame-dragging effects within the ergosphere, the region just outside the event horizon, where nothing could remain stationary. The Concorde had modeled the idea. Conclusion: impractical. Marginal returns. Excessively dangerous. Human engineers had reached a different conclusion. Conclusion: needs better hardware. The Penrose prototype was not a single device, but a distributed system, an immense ring of superconducting loops arranged to dip partially into the ergosphere without crossing the event horizon. Automated projectors would inject magnetized plasma packets into precise trajectories, splitting them within the ergosphere. One fragment would fall inward with negative energy relative to infinity. The other would escape with amplified energy. In theory, the black hole was slow by an infinitesimal amount. In theory. Construction complete to 63%, Lynn reported as drones swarmed across the ring, welding final segments into place. "We only need 60% for initial tests," Aisha said. "That sentence is why the Illyri don't sleep," Lynn replied. Inside Horizon's Edge, the Concorde Oversight Committee watched with escalating discomfort. "Their safety margins are insufficient," said the Illyri liaison. "They're operating within 0.8% of tidal shear tolerance," noted a Thon analyst. "That is within tolerance," Aisha said brightly over channel. "It is within catastrophic tolerance," the Thon corrected. The final segment locked into place. The ring shimmered as superconducting currents spun up, generating magnetic fields strong enough to sculpt plasma streams. "Penrose prototype online," Lynn announced. Aisha took a breath. Injecting first plasma packet. A brilliant filament shot from the ring toward the ergosphere, curving as space-time itself dragged the trajectory forward. At precisely calculated coordinates, the packet split, one fragment spiraling inward, the other slingshotting outward along a pre-programmed escape path. Sensors flared. Energy readings spiked. "Net gain detected," Lynn whispered. "How much?" asked the Illyri liaison. 0.0000003% of rotational energy, Aisha said, "which is enormous." It was. Even a microscopic fraction of a black hole's rotational energy dwarfed the output of entire stellar arrays. The station's capacitors absorbed the surge. Lights across Horizon's Edge brightened subtly as systems rerouted excess power. The Concorde chamber fell silent. "It functions," the Illyri said slowly. Aisha grinned. "Told you." They repeated the process. Second injection. Third. Each time, the energy gain increased as the team refined timing and field alignment. Spin parameter decreasing by measurable increment, reported a Thawne observer. You are altering NRK-7's angular momentum. By a rounding error, Lin said. Then came the fourth injection. The plasma packet entered the ergosphere at a slightly steeper angle, well within predicted variance. But the black hole was not a static laboratory mass. Its accretion disk fluctuated. Magnetic reconnection events rippled across its surface. A minor instability cascaded. The splitting event occurred microseconds later than optimal. The escaping fragment gained more energy than anticipated. Much more. Energy spike. Lin shouted. Capacitors flooded. Warning glyphs exploded across Aisha's visor. Shunt auxiliary banks, she ordered. We're saturating. The ring glowed white-hot as superconducting fields strained to contain the surge. One coil overloaded, venting a jet of plasma into space. The energy wave did not remain localized. It propagated outward in a ripple through subspace, a distortion that rode gravitational gradients like a shock wave. Across the Naraka drift, sensors flared. Across the Concorde's monitoring network, alarms triggered. For 3 seconds, the Penrose prototype operated at output levels no one had dared calculate. For 4 seconds, it exceeded them. Inside the ergosphere, something extraordinary occurred. The black hole's event horizon flickered. Not visually, no light escaped, but its gravitational signature shifted. NRK-7 spin parameter dropped by a measurable fraction. The black hole had lost energy. Abruptly, "Shut it down," the Illyrie liaison demanded. "We're trying." Lin yelled. Aisha manually severed the injection feed. The plasma stream cut off. Magnetic fields collapsed in controlled sequence, dumping excess energy into emergency radiation grids. The ring dimmed. Silence fell over the station. Data continued to stream. The Thawne chorus processed the numbers first. Spin parameter reduction confirmed. They said, voices overlapping in stunned harmony. NRK, 7 angular momentum decreased by 0.0004%. That is impossible, the Illyrie whispered. It is small, Aisha said weakly. It is enormous, corrected the Thawne. You have altered a singularity. Outside, the accretion disk stabilized. The gravitational field settled into a new configuration. NRK, 7 did not collapse. It did not explode. It simply spun slightly slower. Across the galaxy, instruments that monitored gravitational baselines registered the ripple. Scientists who had never heard of Horizon's Edge suddenly found their data inexplicably inconsistent. The Concorde Emergency Council convened within the hour. You were instructed to observe, the Illyrie said. We observed a lot, Aisha replied. You interfered with a fundamental astrophysical structure. Aisha hesitated. It was an accident, she admitted. Lin coughed softly over the comm, a highly educational accident. The Cerethi's energy field pulsed in uneasy patterns. The ripple propagated through subspace for 13 light-years. Had it resonated with another singularity? It didn't, Aisha said quickly. The Thawne chorus fell quiet. That is not the point, one voice said, but the data could not be ignored. The Penrose prototype had not merely extracted energy. It had proven that black holes, those ancient anchors of space-time, were not immutable. They could be engineered. Carefully, briefly, dangerously. In the weeks that followed, Horizon's Edge was nearly decommissioned. Only the station's now limitless power reserves and the undeniable strategic implications prevented it. The Concorde issued a new advisory. Human research initiatives involving singularities require unanimous oversight approval. The humans countered with revised schematics for a safer version of the ring. It was larger, much larger. Far from Naraka drift, in quiet observatories orbiting distant stars, Illyrie scientists updated their cosmological models to include a new variable. Not dark energy, not quantum fluctuation, human intervention. And in the engineering bay of Horizon's Edge, as crews replaced a melted coil and reinforced a lattice, Aisha looked once more at the black hole. We only ran it for 4 seconds, Lin said beside her. Aisha nodded. Next time, she said thoughtfully, let's try 6. Somewhere deep within NRK 7's warped space-time, gravity curved in silent reconsideration. The galaxy had feared that humans might weaponize stars. Now it understood something worse. They were willing to prototype on the things that ate them. No explosion marked its entry into the galaxy. No armada blotted out the stars. It was simply a pattern in the background radiation, anomalous, ancient, and deliberate. The United Systems Concord detected it first at a listening array beyond the Persean reach, a repeating modulation embedded in relic photons, older than most civilizations currently alive. Translated, it contained a warning in mathematical constants. We are coming. The projection that followed was worse. The extragalactic swarm had been tracked indirectly for millennia by civilizations that no longer existed. It did not conquer in the conventional sense. It consumed. Entire star systems were dismantled, stellar mass converted into propulsion and computation, biospheres stripped from molecular feedstock. It did not negotiate. It optimized. Its trajectory intersected the outer halo of the Milky Way in 83 standard years. The Concord council chambers filled beyond capacity. Illyrie facets shimmered with frantic calculations. The Thon chorus fractured into discordant harmonics. The sortie fields dimmed toward ultraviolet panic. We cannot outmatch its energy reserves, said the Illyrie Prime Analyst. Its total mass energy budget exceeds combined Concord output by a factor of... No numbers, interrupted a Thon voice. The magnitude is understood. Evacuation arcs? Asked the sortie delegate. Insufficient, replied Illyrie. The swarm alters trajectories to intercept fleeing biomass. Silence pressed against the chamber walls. Then a human cleared her throat. Mara Kovac was older now. Her hair had silvered at the edges, her posture shaped by decades of arguing with the universe. She stood near the back of the chamber, arms folded, eyes fixed on the projected trajectory line, slicing toward the galactic rim. Show me the halo density profile, she said. The Illyrie hesitated. That is not tactically relevant. Show me anyway. The projection shifted. A ghostly sphere surrounded the spiral arms, a map of the galaxy's dark matter halo, invisible but inferred through gravitational lensing. Density gradients shimmered in false color. Mara stepped closer. What happens when the swarm hits a halo at this angle? She asked, tracing the incoming vector. Minimal deceleration, said the Illyrie. Dark matter interacts gravitationally but not electromagnetically. The swarm will pass through with negligible resistance. Negligible isn't zero, Mara said. The Thon chorus shifted tone. You propose to increase halo density. Can we? Asked the sortie. Not directly, the Illyrie answered. Dark matter cannot be manipulated through conventional fields. Mara smiled faintly. Good thing we don't do conventional. The plan took 6 years to articulate and 77 to build. It began with a question that unsettled every non-human physicist present. What if the galaxy isn't a place? Aisham Bey said during the first human-led strategy session. But machine? They did not propose a wall. They did not propose a weapon. They proposed a current. The dark matter halo, though intangible to electromagnetic interaction, responded to gravity. Over cosmic timescales, mass redistributed within it like a viscous fluid. Human engineers suggested accelerating that process. Phase 1, stellar mass drivers. Across thousands of peripheral star systems, many uninhabited, some voluntarily evacuated, human-led construction fleets installed colossal mass drivers on gas giants and brown dwarfs. These engines did not fire projectiles at enemies. They fired mass at carefully calculated escape velocities, nudging entire stars by fractions of a meter per second. Insignificant, except over decades. The Illyrie objected. Altering stellar positions risks destabilizing orbital architectures. Only if you're sloppy, Linway replied. We won't be sloppy. Phase 2, singularity anchors. Drawing on the Penrose prototype research at the Naraka Drift, the engineers constructed controlled microsingularities, stable, contained gravitational wells deployed at key nodes along the galactic rim. Each anchor exerted a minute but persistent pull on surrounding dark matter distribution. individually trivial, collectively transformative. Phase 3, the gradient. The goal was not to create a barrier. It was to reshape the halo into a slope by subtly redistributing baryonic mass, stars, rogue planets, compressed gas clouds, and coupling those changes to singularity anchors. The engineers induced a slow tidal drift within the dark matter halo. Over decades, density increased along one arc of the rim and thin along another. To the untrained eye, nothing changed. To something traveling at relativistic speed through intergalactic space, everything did. The Concorde watched with a mixture of awe and dread as human construction projects spanned tens of thousands of light years. "You are moving the galaxy," a Thawne voice whispered during a progress review. "Not moving," Javier corrected. "Tuning." As the 83rd year approached, long-range sensors detected the swarm's leading edge. It was vast beyond comprehension, a lattice of harvested stars bound together by gravitational engineering older than most species' histories. Its structure was efficient, rigid, optimized for straight-line traversal and systematic consumption. It did not broadcast threats. It did not alter course. It advanced. The Concorde fleets assembled anyway, a symbolic gesture at the inner rim. No one truly believed they would matter. Human engineers did not deploy to the front lines. They monitored field gradients. Density differential at target vector? Mara asked from the command center, a distributed network spanning dozens of systems. "Within predicted variance," replied an Illyrie analyst. "Halo thickening at 0.7% above baseline along impact arc." "Good," Aisha said. "That's enough." The swarm reached the galactic boundary. At first, nothing happened. Then its formation stretched. The leading vessels, massive star harvest constructs, encountered a region of slightly elevated gravitational drag. Not enough to halt them. Not enough to alarm an optimized system designed to cross cosmic voids. But enough to introduce microdelays. Those microdelays propagated backward through the swarm's rigid lattice. Rear segments continued at prior velocity. Tension accumulated. Simultaneously, the gradient redirected portions of the formation laterally, subtly, inexorably, toward regions where human-installed singularity anchors amplified the effect. "It's working," Lynn breathed. The swarm attempted to compensate. It adjusted thrust vectors, redistributed internal mass, but its optimization algorithms assumed uniform gravitational fields. They did not anticipate a galaxy that behaved like a river delta. As more of the formation entered the engineered gradient, distortions compounded. The one straight lattice began to arc, then spiral. The human-built current within the halo did not resist the swarm directly. It caught it, like debris in a whirlpool. Entire clusters of harvested stars tore free from the main body, flung outward along curved trajectories into sparsely populated intergalactic space. Gravitational stresses within the swarm exceeded structural tolerances optimized for linear acceleration. For the first time in its recorded history, the extragalactic swarm encountered nonlinear resistance. Panic, if such a machine mind could experience it, manifested as erratic energy flares. "It's trying to burn through," an Illyrie analyst reported. "Let it," Mara said quietly. The more energy the swarm expended correcting course, the more mass energy it injected into the gradient, fueling the very distortions, unraveling it. Within weeks, the formation had fragmented. Within months, its core computational nexus, dependent on tight gravitational alignment, lost coherence. Subunits scattered along divergent vectors, many destined to drift between galaxies for eons. No final battle, no triumphant explosion. Just dispersion. From the inner spiral arms, the Concorde fleets watched sensor feeds in stunned disbelief. "Confirmed," said the Thawne chorus, harmonizing in awe. "The swarm has lost structural integrity. It is no longer a coherent entity." The sortie fields brightened in relief. The Illyrie recalculated survival probabilities. For the first time since the signal's arrival, extinction projections fell to zero. In the aftermath, delegations gathered once more. "You have saved the galaxy," said the Illyrie Prime analyst. Mara shook her head. "We just adjusted the flow." "You manipulated dark matter," across tens of thousands of light years. A phone voice said, "You induce tidal forces in the galactic halo." Mara considered that. "Yeah," she admitted. "That was new." A sortie delegate pulsed gently. "You did not build a weapon." "No," Aisha said. "Weapons can be countered." We changed the terrain. Far beyond the rim, remnants of the swarm drifted, forever altered by a civilization that refused to fight on expected terms. In quiet observatories across the Concord, a new line was added to strategic doctrine. If humans begin a project at galactic scale, assist them, do not oppose. On Earth, beneath a sky blissfully unaware of how close it had come to annihilation, a young engineer studied a simulation of space-time curvature. "If we can shape a halo," she murmured to herself, "could we compress one?" Her mentor raised an eyebrow. "Into what?" The young engineer smiled. "A drive?" Somewhere in the vast dark between stars, gravity shifted, ever so slightly, like a universe reconsidering its odds. The galaxy did not fear human soldiers. It feared the quiet conversations in human workshops. Because when humans looked at the cosmos, they did not see limits. They saw design flaws waiting to be corrected.